how did you guys meet?
Wow. How did we meet? Can you tell the story a bit about that? Okay. So I think the first time we met, you know what, it's fine, you two better go.
Okay, well, look, officially when we met, because we saw each other at church. Well, I saw him because he was always in the front, jumping. I think everybody, yeah. Yes, we officially met when he did an MPD presentation with me. Sharing campus and ministry partnership opportunity, and that's officially how we met.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
later on, I joined the campus ministry, serving there, and yeah, I guess the rest is history. Because he was heading up the campus ministry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So when Ryan, you're doing this presentation, are you saying, okay, this is a cute lady that I'm doing this presentation to? It could be more, or are you just spiritual in this in your mode?
Look, I had to. I was going to say something else. I had to come down from the mountain. No, I didn't actually know because we hadn't met formally. I'd done a presentation. It basically just says like about what I do, what I want to do, what the vision is, and everything. I'd done that to a friend of hers, and then afterwards you kind of asked, look, is there anyone else you think that might be interested? And then she recommended Jessica. So when I got there, before I got there, I wasn't actually 100% sure who I was going to see because we hadn't really met at church. We may have like walked past each other, but literally that was it. So I mean, that was the first. I don't even chatted before that. Hey? Yeah, we hadn't even chatted before. So that was the first time we actually spoke when I did the presentation. So then we chatted, and then obviously did the presentation, and then carried on. No, I didn't even think anything of it. I was. I don't know if it is extreme is the word, but I was quite focused then. So I was not thinking of anything outside of what I felt I should be doing at the time intentionally, and it wasn't because I was very spiritual. Like I was intentionally trying to do that. I was like, look, let me focus on what I'm supposed to be doing, and then I know if I get that right, the rest of the stuff will sort itself out with time. So that was kind of the mindset I approached it. So that's why nothing played out till later. But I think I think God still was ordering things from a timing point of view. So yeah, then things obviously played out a bit later once we got to know each other within the campus context and in meetings and serving on the campus and everything.
And Jess, what was the pull to campus for you? Was it more you are seeing a potential husband here, or in the presentation of the vision for campus, you're like, actually, I think I want to be closer to this work? What happened there?
Actually, at the time, I was fairly new to the church, and so I hadn't yet decided where I want to serve. So yeah, I was still thinking about it. I think I joined the assimilation team, but I wanted to do something more. And I actually didn't know that there was a campus ministry. And so I came from a youth ministry a few years prior to that. So I thought, well, when he told me there's a campus ministry, I thought, okay, well, this could be something that I could actually enjoy, being part of. So yeah, it was actually also just the timing. I was actually praying and asking God, okay, where should I, get involved at church? And I didn't know there was campus ministry. So yeah, but I don't think there were any sparks in the beginning. But yeah, I guess with time, as Ryan said, as we got to know each other.
In the beginning, yeah, I don't think we were thinking further than, but also, Jess didn't mention she was involved in campus ministry at NNMU when she was part of the campus committee there and everything. So like campus ministry she knew about, and then obviously I said, look, we've got campus ministry here, and then I suppose then it was she felt that's where God was leading her, so it was an easy fit. She'd done it before. So that's why I didn't have to really say much. She was like, oh, okay. She knows campus ministry. So, and then I guess from there.
Okay. So what was the switch from ministry partners to marriage partners? Like what was that thing that then said, actually, yeah. What was that switch? Was it a moment? Was it just a culmination? Like, what led to that?
I think it was over time. I don't know. I think it was over time. It wasn't. I don't think. I mean, I speak for myself, but I mean, I don't think any of us, neither of us, went into either campus ministry or us being in the same team with any preconceived ideas, at least in the beginning. So I think then it was just over time you kind of get to know the person, and then yeah, I suppose you're open, you're praying the whole time as well. And then I guess, you're open to hear what God starts to say. And maybe he starts to kind of nudge you in that direction. Then after a bit of nudging, then maybe you start listening, and then maybe you start being a bit more intentional. That's yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, my just funny story. My mom came to visit me once, and we had a campus to have that water baptism. Yeah, so I was supporting, doing the ordination. We baptized like a lot of students at the over 20, and so my mom came with me because she was around. And as we were leaving, she said to me, "That guy likes you. I can see he likes you." And I said, "So no ways," because he never let on at all, that there was any sort of interest. So yeah, that was sort of the first time that I really thought that, okay, maybe,
Hmm.
the person could be interested because I couldn't see it. But my mom did, and moms know, right? Moms know
Yeah,
things.
moms know. No, moms can see through it all. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Parent podcast. This is where we talk about all things parenting. So it's another exciting conversation with Ryan and Jessica Euster, and they're going to really be talking to us through their parenting journey. So they have 3 daughters together. And as any modern parent knows, one of the complexities in this parenting world actually relates to how do you actually navigate the world of digital. It makes life a little bit different, and we're going to be getting into that discussion today. So remember, our church details are going to appear somewhere on the screen. Feel free to visit us every Sunday at 9 a.m. We meet in Midrand, and the address will be showing up somewhere on the screen. So looking forward to having you there and hosting you. So wow, what an interesting start, to this marriage journey. So 12 years later, you now have 3 girls. Can you just give us a sense of the ages of the girls?
Okay, so Michaela's 9.5. She turns 10 in August. Ellie's 7. Eliana is 7, and she turned 7 in Feb. So there's 2.5 years between the 2 older ones. Excuse me. And then Gabrielle is 18 months. So then so that's what, 6-year gap between the middle and the baby, and about an 8-year gap between the oldest and the youngest. So those are the 3.
It's always interesting how this children raised by the same people, but they tend to be different people. They just seem to become prepackaged with their personalities and who they are meant to be. So when you guys reflect on how you were parented and the world of parenting that you would have grown in as children yourself, and you compare it to the modern world that you are parenting in, is there any differences, especially when we consider the impact of digital technologies, or is it kind of the same, but maybe different? I don't know. Is it different?
Sure. It's it's not even close to the same. I mean, what I used to do, and that's only, I think, when I was probably in a high school. I think I used to come home, and maybe a little bit in the afternoon, I'd watch a bit of television. That was my digital reality. I mean, obviously, cell phones, I think, came out when I was in about grade 11 or 12. The internet, I think, also sometime in high school, it came into existence. So yes, by the way, there was a time when the internet didn't exist. Never mind Google not existing. I mean, the whole internet. I mean, it was a funny DOS-based system with very little graphics and a lot of writing. That's what I seem to remember. So Oh yeah, and I think we did have one or two computer games. So they were very, very 2D. I don't think 3D even existed then. And sort of it's very linear. You kind of ran backwards and forwards across the screen. But they weren't as engaging, or the ability to draw you in wasn't nearly what it is now. So that was the world for us. I mean, if you if you watched TV when I was growing up in another language, whatever that may have been, then you got your radio and you put it next to the television for simulcast. Um, and there are very, very limited options. I mean, I know growing up, some families had Mnet, which then had, what's that called? KTV, I think it was called. So they had that. So that was cartoons in the afternoon. We didn't have that. So it was kind of whatever the few normal channels were able to get. That's what we had. So you certainly weren't a Facebook, Instagram, or none of that stuff existed. I mean, that came out when I was in varsity. So that's the world we grew up in. I mean, there was very little sort of pressing in for your time constantly, all the time. So trying to pull away your attention. It wasn't. So it's quite a different world, I think, to how we grew up.
Yeah.
And do you find, I guess, do you see the changes in the modern world as positively beneficial, or is it something that we should be cautious about as we parent? How do you think about them?
I think it's beneficial, but with anything that's beneficial, as a parent, you need to put up the guardrails. You need to make sure that the boundaries are in place so that this thing, is not abused or does not negatively affect your children. Because at the end of the day, they are children, and if you leave them up to their own to decide, they will just continue. As long as they can, and are allowed to be online. For example, Michaela now, she's in grade 4, so now they have Teams accounts, right, from school. And so they're allowed to chat to the teacher on Teams, assignments are submitted to Teams, and so they also chat to the friends on Teams, And it's interesting because Kayla was complaining just last week, oh, the laptop is slow, and can't you just check the assignment on my phone? So she downloaded Teams on my phone and created or logged in her account details. And so now, gosh, every afternoon, evening, ping, 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 my phone, and it's just going because they are chatting with the classmates and, all sorts of things. And very interesting, very different. And so again, it's something that we're now navigating, trying to see, okay, whenever a message comes through, I don't necessarily pass it on to her. There's certain times that I will say, okay, you can have a look and see, catch up on whatever's happening, because I don't want her to get into that habit of every time there's a message, I need to, check the phone. Life can go on, and you can find out later, whatever you need to find out. So yeah, very interesting.
That is very, very interesting. Like, I only knew about Teams just yesterday, and now kids actually have access to it for their schoolwork. That's actually so interesting. Wow. I like what you're saying in terms of the internet, digital technologies, social media, all these things, they are beneficial, but it's the boundaries of consumption that make a difference on whether they're going to be a positive impact in the life of a child or whether they're going to be a negative impact. Um, some of the boundaries you've mentioned now, and I really like that boundary. I'm calling it in my mind, I guess, latency in the response. That you don't have to respond to everything as it happens now, but actually you can respond, in an hour, and it's actually okay. What are other boundaries that you've put, around the kids as it relates to, to digital technologies?
Let me think. So Michaela doesn't have a cell phone. Michaela's not going to get a cell phone anytime soon. So I guess when she watches this one day, well, actually she knows. So when she watches this in a year or two and she sees her parents talking about it, it's going to be interesting. But yeah, so she hasn't got a cell phone. Quite a few of her friends do. Parents, I guess, make those decisions for different reasons. They may be very valid, whatever the reason is that her friends have got cell phones. I mean, that's their parents' decision. So for us, I don't think she needs a cell phone. Communication is fine. And she's probably not going to get one. In fact, not going to get one before the age of 12. So we'll see after that. We'll decide. So she wants obviously one now because a fair amount of her friends do. And so we've told her she can have one in matric, to which you can imagine how well that went down. So we'll see, but definitely not before the age of 12. I think Ellie's the same. Well, okay, and Gabrielle, I suppose, as well, but it's only for those two. I think we're just very aware of what screen time, does to your brain, your focus, your attention, all of those kind of things. So that's the one thing. So the cell phone's the one thing. Television, we try, and the general rule is no TV during the week. Doesn't always work out like that. That's the idea. But we're very specific of what they're allowed to watch. So there are, we might be a little bit more on the extreme, possibly, but you only get one chance with your kids and to grow and for the kind of value, and they're being bombarded. Our point of view is they're being bombarded all the time with stuff. So let me not increase the bombardment. So there are three sort of programs which they're allowed to watch on YouTube. It's three, and they're Christian based, and they're all three of them are cartoon. So it's sort of different series, different shows, different things that happen. Three or maybe four that they're allowed to watch. Otherwise, if they watch something, it'll be with one of us, especially if it's something they haven't watched before. And we're quite specific about how long they're allowed to watch for as well. So obviously, when they come home, homework, or I guess that's during the week. That's all I can think of. So the cell phone is the one thing which they don't have and they won't be getting anytime soon. Specific content. So what we did as well with YouTube is we actually signed up. And look, this might sound like normal for some people, but let me just lay it out as we do it. We signed up for the YouTube whatever account premium. There we go, with no ads, because like you'd be watching something or they'd be watching a cartoon, and then like whatever Game of Thrones or something hectic with like a werewolf's head or something, suddenly comes on the screen, and you're thinking, because the ads clearly are not targeted based on the program. They're targeted, obviously they use a different algorithm for that. So, I mean, that comes on, and then we've quickly got to skip or some really inappropriate advert, which is not appropriate for their age at all.
That's what we saw.
A lot of alcohol adverts and a whole lot of other very inappropriate ones, especially for their age. So we went for that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is just to try and, I think our mindset is that what happens on the screen, be it your phone, be it your computer, be it your television, it affects your brain, it affects your morals, it affects your view of the world, it affects your development. Even it can help, it can cause you, I think, to develop a little bit ahead of maybe what you should by being exposed to certain things which maybe aren't age appropriate. So I think there's a whole big world out there which can, like Jessica said, can add value with maybe the right guidelines, or it can just cause problems later in life. Because they're so small, a lot of what's going in now, we're probably not going to see the outcome for maybe the next 3, 5, 7 years. And then certain things are going to pop up. We're going to wonder where they came from. So we want to try and not be in that situation further down the line. So I don't know if I answered it, but so we're very specific about what they're allowed to watch. And as I said, we may even be a little bit extreme, but we're sort of thinking 5 to 7 years down the line, what do we want? How do we want our girls' brains to be formed? What do we want them to value? What are the influences we want to get inside their heads and their hearts? And that's kind of our thinking behind the boundaries and the guidelines we put in. I don't know if that's, yeah. So
That's so, yeah. That's really helpful. That's really helpful and quite precise. So a young couple might be sitting there, hearing this content, and they don't even know how to start this conversation. Like, did you sit down and say, let's talk about the boundaries around screens and digital technology? Or is it just something you agreed on? How do you navigate that in the context of marriage to get to an agreed set of boundaries?
Okay, well, maybe let me make one comment, then you can add if you want to. But I think it starts, obviously, the agreement starts here. We need to decide what is our viewpoint or what is our agreement. What are we happy with before we even take it to, towards the kids? Like, what do we think? Do we think like television's like, okay, they can watch as much as they want? Which, I mean, if that's your view, then that's fine. But I think we need to agree with what is our viewpoint of all of that between the two of us. And then I think depending on age appropriateness, it either is enforced or spoken about. Like if they're 7, and 5, I'm not going to sit down and have a conversation. Say, listen, screen time can do this, and your values and your ethic and all of that. I mean, it's like you just tell them this is what you can watch, like full stop, and there's no discussion. But if the child is maybe 13, or something, and you're looking to start, then maybe it's a case of, okay, you know what, this is why we'd like to do this. This is why we want to take it, things in this direction. But then also you'd probably have to put your foot down a little bit with some things as well. I mean, not everything is an open discussion when you parent, because sometimes, you can see 10, 15 years down the line, but your child can't. So sometimes they might hop up and down a bit, but you kind of thinking, okay, well, I don't like this, but the consequences are maybe potentially worse.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, that agreement started with us and with Michaela. That's when we already decided, we had a discussion, this is what we agree in terms of TV, and that sort of just continued. And then obviously as new things come along, we would then talk about it. I mean, for example, the Teams example I made earlier, that was as recent as this week, that started happening, where she was now using my phone. So on the one hand, I'm happy she's using my phone because I can see what's happening. But then, it wasn't necessarily something that we had thought of before. So we hadn't really discussed it. I just decided I will show her the messages when I feel, okay, it's time for you to see it, but it's not really something that we had discussed properly because it was on my phone. So I just, sort of made that call. So I think, you sort of, I guess, will as things get added into their lives and as they grow up, we'll take it as it comes and then discuss it. I think some things we would need to sit down and have an agreement on. Other things maybe wouldn't nearly be that necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how we started out.
This is really helpful. I've taken a lot of notes, and to talk about everything here might take quite a bit of time. I want to just pick on a few things that you've mentioned. You've mentioned specific programs that your children are allowed to watch. A parent could be there saying, "Well, as long as it's cartoons, it's okay." Is that not a good broad principle to have, to say, if my child is watching cartoons, it's okay? Why would that be a challenge?
I'm going to go for that one.
Okay.
Then I'll comment.
Yeah, because we've seen, unfortunately or fortunately for ourselves, that all cartoons are not equal, so to say. And the messaging for us is sometimes it's underlying. The kids won't pick up on it, but there's some messaging that is not appropriate, for their age that come through, and it doesn't align. So that wouldn't necessarily align with our values as a family and as believers. So for us, it's not all the same, and that's why we have specific things that we allow them to watch. So it's not the same, and I think it's also just, I guess, as a parent, just really relying on God to help you to be sort of spiritually aware. Even when you're sitting and you may be watching a program with your child for the first time. There have been instances where we had to say, okay, we're not continuing to watch this particular cartoon, and they want to know why. But you can't really explain why because you don't really want to take them into that topic just yet. You don't feel that they are ready. And so it then can, sort of have an effect of a meltdown or two, but then, you deal with the meltdown and, you find something else to do with them. Yeah, it's one of those things where you do like pick up that certain programs that are marketed as kids programs are not actually for kids.
Mhm. And I think, I mean, you said something powerful even earlier in terms of this content that our children are watching, that we even as adults are watching, are informing our values. They're influencing what we're going to be in 3 to 5 years time. So that content is authoring and wiring them. So that's actually quite amazing. You also mentioned something on a limited amount of screen time, to say, screen time is impacting them. So you limit it. Well, if it's good content for the whole day, is that not okay? Like, what could be some negative consequences there? So if they are watching, I don't know if kids can watch a sermon, but if they are watching a sermon on the phone for 24 hours or whatever, big extreme, but I'm just saying something that we would perceive as good content, is that still, negative for their minds, or should we be cautious about the time on screens in general?
Okay. Look, that's a whole another conversation. I think when it comes to digital, there's so many different variables, sort of all. That's why I think it's good to have an approach, whatever your approach is as a parent. Like, some would be more extreme, some might be more, what the other side of extreme is, but more relaxed, whatever the other side is. Some might be more on the one extreme, some might be more towards the other side. But I think you need to have an approach. I don't think it would be wise, if I can say it like it, just to allow things to flow. I don't think that, because the content on TV, I mean, the content available out there is not all genuinely with the right kind of heart and values generated. So it comes from different sources for different reasons, and from different world viewpoints, and from different value sets. So, and what I meant earlier when I said is there's so much sort of amalgamating the same place. You've got the aspect of, obviously, values of, what they see in the cartoons or the programs, about how people treat each other, how they talk, the kind of things they prioritize, the kind of stuff they do, even in their spare time. They keep talking about, oh, let's go and do this, for whatever, for example. And now, I mean, that keeps coming up in a program. It's gonna, unless you say, look, we don't do this in this house, for example, the child is most likely going to say, oh, okay, well, let me think about that. So that's the one thing. There's the values aspect, but then there's also the maybe physiological aspect, which I think there's quite a lot of research out there which has proven that. I mean, the screen time, when you talk about the rewiring of your brain and concentration levels and all of that sort of thing, so it can have a negative effect on that. So that's what I meant. There's so many things all going. There's maybe the value side. One could even argue that there's a spiritual side. You could even talk about the physiological side. So you can get, like, for example, you spoke about sermons, so there is value to be got. So it's not like, digital is wicked. Digital is like anything else. It's a neutral, it's a space, but it depends on the content that's filled in that space. And then also, from a physiological point of view, I think research has shown that to expose yourself to a screen in whichever form for extended periods of time in a day has a negative effect on your body, physiologically, psychologically, from a concentration point of view, mentally. So there's the practical. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think there's the practical side as well as all those other things. So I think maybe the most important thing is just have an approach, have an approach you've thought through, and then, that's what I think.
Right. Mm. Mm. No, that makes sense. And so the key thing, so far I'm noting some key principles that we can take away, is have an agreement as parents. Like, what's your viewpoint relating to digital and your children? To have an approach. Don't just flow. Like, what are you going to do about this digital technology? And thirdly, I think that long-term perspective, we are thinking about this with 5 to 10 years time, as part of the decisions that we actually make today. So that's really quite interesting. There's another point that you made earlier that I found really interesting, which is more supervisory watching. So if they are watching something for the first time, you actually sit and watch with them. Can you talk more a little bit about that? What does that practically look like? Is that literally you sit together and you watch with them, and then if it doesn't align, you switch off? Like how does that practically work? Because that is not so familiar. Because normally we say, well, it's cartoons, let them go watch by themselves or whatever. But to actually sit with them is a little bit different. So talk us a little bit more about that and why you have chosen to also incorporate that as a practice.
I think it actually is that simple. We sit and we watch with them, and if it's not okay, we shut off. Yeah, that's all that there is to it.
It's literally that
yeah.
simple. Yeah. And this is, yeah. No, go for it.
Yeah, and the reasoning is we need to know what are they consuming and if it is okay, for them to take it.
I think we've seen,
Okay.
after watching for, there's different things on TV, and as an adult, you've seen obviously a lot of things over time. So you know that not everything digital is created equal. So, from that point of, and from that point of view, then we've decided, okay, if we can't be sure just because it has a nice heading and it looks nice or it's got a jingle behind it that the content might be helpful. So not in this day and age, unfortunately. So that's why we'll sit and we'll just check, and then if it's okay, then it's okay.
And also, just mindful of the fact that we aren't going to always be there. They at some point they will watch when we're not around, or they not with us. And so the time where we can actually sort of monitor and put in those boundaries is now, because at some point they will make those decisions for themselves, and as they get older, and we are with some of the shows, we try to explain, depending on, whether they are mature enough to understand why this one and not that one, and so that they at some point when they are older can make good choices for themselves in terms of what they're watching.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I guess the absence of the phone ownership until at minimum 12 is also helpful. Now, I think one of the challenges that I see for a lot of parents with younger children, even a child as young as 7, the friends already have phones. So they're already on phones. So a 7-year-old is saying, "Hey, I want a phone. I'm ready for a phone. My friend has a phone," and so forth and so forth. How do you manage and deal with that peer pressure on you as a parent, but also on them as a child, to figure out how to kind of navigate that? Because there is that complexity of others have it and I don't. Like, how do you manage that? How do you think through that?
Do you want to answer?
Perfect.
Yeah, I think for us it's kind of the same as any other thing. My daughter can come home and say, "My friend has this Barbie doll. I also want it." But I cannot give you something just because somebody else has it. What do you need it for? What is the logic behind it? So it's also trying to give them some reasons, but also for us, we make it very clear in other things as well. You can't have something just because someone else wants it, has it. That's not a good enough reason, so that's for us is, I know I certainly don't feel pressure with regards to getting Michaela a phone. I don't feel pressure at all. And she tries every now and then. I mean, I complained to her the other day. I was in a meeting, and in the evening I was on a Zoom meeting, and these Teams messages kept pinging, and I'm in the meeting. And afterwards, or the next day, I said to her, your friends, they're on Teams late, and she said, "Well, maybe you should just get me my own phone, then it won't bother you, in your meeting." So I said to her, "Yeah, nice try. Not going to happen, but yeah, it's one of those things, and I guess we'll see, how we go, how we approach it or how we deal with it as it goes along. But yeah, I don't think for us there isn't pressure, and also I think because they're still young and they're not allowed to take phones to school, that also helps, So it's not like everybody is at school with their phone. So I think if it was different, maybe there would be more pressure for her. but it's only really if she visits the friend and they have their phone, or because some of the friends who call, then in any case, when they call from the mom's number. So then, so I've got a phone, the mom has a phone, you guys can communicate, so the real purpose of having a phone, communicating, it's still an option. You can still communicate with your friends in the school holidays or when you're not seeing them.
Wow, what an amazing conversation. I've taken so much notes. I might be running out of ink at this particular rate. Wow, thank you so much. This is really quite insightful and important. And I think what's also important about this conversation is that we are actually in it. We are not sitting here as actually parents of 30-year-olds who've gone through the digital wave, but it's actually something that's hitting our generation quite uniquely, and that rate is bound to accelerate also with the advent of AI. We'll need to have another conversation one day and say, how do you parent in the age of AI? What does that actually mean? So the world is changing so fast, and we're taking a lot of insights, I think, from how you guys are doing it, just in terms of approaching it with a principled way of thinking about it. And the principles are not perfect. Like, it's not that you manage to do it perfectly, but it's that there's a game plan, at least that's there, that you can follow for most of the scenarios and most of the instances. And I think that's important, to not let it just happen, because if it just happens, then we don't know, and you don't know who's actually influencing your child, who's influencing my child in thinking through and in having certain values actually embedded in them. And it's those content that they're actually watching. So, Ryan, just thank you so much. I think there's been a lot of insightful things that you have said. Any final things that you want to leave our listeners and viewers with as it relates to this topic of digital, as they are now going to sit down and have some tough conversations about, some of this conversation, or maybe even change some things? What would be your final, kind of perspective that you want to share with them?
I think probably the main thing, which is on my mind for a lot of things, is that these little people who we love so much, we sort of have we own we have one chance with them. So you have one chance at your 7 to 9, you have one chance 13 to 15, just the different stages. And it doesn't mean if maybe you started differently and now you're thinking of the digital thing for the first time in their teens, then it's late. It doesn't mean that at all. But I think the perspective we approach this with, just like anything else, is that we really want them to be the best that they can be. We want them to fulfill, obviously, from a Christian point of view, their full potential. So that's sort of the framework we use. We try and use to judge, if I can say, or make up guidelines for everything that we do. So the digital is one of them. We're just thinking, okay, like in terms of, we want Michaela, Ellie, Gabrielle, to be able to be the best they can be, to be able to fulfill everything that they can, and especially everything God wants for them. Is this, whatever X is that going to add value? Can it add value to that? And if it can add value, in what setting can it add value? Must it be limited in order to add value, or must there be a lot of it in order for it to add value? Must it be only at certain times? So that's what I can say. We love them so much. We just want them to be able to thrive. And I think then, so with the different areas of their lives, we look at and say, okay, are there guidelines, or is there an intervention we need to give in this area in order to help them thrive more now and in the future? I hope that makes sense. But that's sort of the framework that we use for a lot of things, digital being one of them.
Mm. Well, Jess, any final words from your end?
I think consistency, I think with any long-term decision that you make in your life or goal that you have, consistency is important. And consistency doesn't mean you're getting it right every single day. It means you go back to your plan, you go back to what you had set, out as your steps, and you try again the next day.
Mm. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been the Let's Parent podcast. We meet every Sunday as Every Nation Midrand at 9 a.m. You'll see our church details kind of appearing here. I hope that in this conversation, you've taken something away from it. I think one of the key things that are standing out for me is have a game plan when it comes to these digital things, and let it be a game plan that you have agreed as a couple. You have sat down and said, these are the boundaries. This is the way that we're going to approach this thing, and approach it in that way. We're not saying that there's one way to do it. We're saying have a plan, and however you choose to then roll out that plan is up to you. But we hope that you've been blessed and that you've gained in wisdom, as we have said today with the Eustace, and we've learned a little bit more about parenting. See you on the next episode.